So when you're doing the first layer, be mindful where the blobs of water is, because here if I pull from there and I go here and then I stop there, you see how there's a big pooling of water there? So I normally try to not have that, so I'll just push it back and let it just, yeah, we don't even need to put, so as long as there's no huge pulling, we are okay. And then let me do one line and let that leave, and then pull some of this. So that initial base wash was not super wet. So what you want is like a film of water, not a massive pooling of water. Because if you have too much water, what happens is right, like this is, let's just put a lot of water in this one. If I put that on that, you see how it's just sitting on top? So that's a sign that you have too much water on the surface. So you don't want that. So if this happens, what you can do is just clean your brush, take all the water away, and then you can use, so this is kind of a thirstier brush, and just trying to suck the water off this. So this is, it sucks it back into the brush, and then now it's a little less wet. So this is the perfect wetness. It's something like this, it's like a film that's like this. And then we can go put some paint on that. So what it does is it then slowly is dispersed. So while that's working and spreading very, very slowly, it will eventually become more soft like this. So while this is still wet, we can play around with, just clean your brush and then take some of that off. So this is more like a thirsty, clean brush. You can try to pull this out beyond the shape, beyond the initial. Yeah, it's like a thirsty, slightly drier brush, but clean. So when you pull it, you're basically spreading the paint that is in the middle there. Okay, so this one, what I did was, I'm just gonna go like that. So it's basically just water first, but you want to have your lines with the water. So it's kind of like that. So you're creating water lines, the shape of a feather, and then you have to be a bit quick on this because for some reason my paper dried really fast. And then go into directly to your, sorry, where am I going with this? To your paint, and then while it's still wet, you can dab it on into the spine, just the middle here. So this is still wet, it's then spreading a little bit. So that's the only color I want to put in there. After this, I've just washed my brush, and now there's still some water left everywhere, but it's really fast drying. So what I'm doing now, my brush is clean, but it's full of water. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these color from the spine out into the feathery bit. So when it reaches the end, it becomes really soft and smooth and almost barely there. So that's the other technique. And then if you have some time, you can try and go into a slightly dark color and try to do it again. So I'm doing a red tone there, just in the spine. And then clean your brush and have a nice, clean but full of water brush, and kind of pull this out. That looks quite nice. See the difference. So this is a different paper. This is 100% cotton paper. I think the key is to have it quite wet and then pour it quite fast, because that's quite nice. So you have this thick and thin and blue sort of texture, which is very nice. So I'm going to add some yellow in there while it's still wet. So what I do with the yellow is I just drop it and see if I can pull this out. It's a bit messy, but I kind of like the messiness. The dropping of the yellow kind of creates this lightness in the middle of the spine, which then makes it look more like a bird feathers somehow. I want to kind of show you this one. So this one is, you go down with a wash first, quite intense color, quite wet, and then while that's wet, you go back in with a clean brush, but very wet, and you create this sort of white. It's kind of, I guess you can say it's like I'm bleaching the middle, because I'm taking with the water, it separates the pigment away. So that's the next thing. So with that, you can use some kind of brush that is not so big. So a medium brush is fine. Go with purple. And you want to mix the color on a palette sort of first. So this is the color. The idea is to create using the brush in the same way, so you want to have feathery edge like that, and then while that's wet, clean your brush, and with a damp clean brush you want to pull the same way, but this time just do it very quickly. One, I put down a color bit there. See if this works. Doesn't look like it's working. Two. So you see I just dropped water like that into the surface while it's still wet. So you can sort of see that it's starting to happen, starting to spread, right? So while you're in this state, you can do a second row, but the second time you do this, trying to have more white lines in here is clean brush, but this time instead of it being wet, you want it thirsty. So thirsty, clean brush, and you can pull this with it across. So you're now bleaching the middle part of this. So once I do a few, I need to clean my brush because I have basically taken away some of the paint into my brush. So wash your brush every time you've done one layer and take most of the water off. So this may affect, the effect that you get may vary depending on your kinds of paper. So that's another one that's really quite nice. And then I'm just gonna leave that because now you have all these different medium, light, dark happening in the same area. The next one is playing with a pull. So this was what I call, you push it from this side to that side, right? You push away. The next one I want to try is to pull. So using the same color, let me just use that same pull. You're doing the same thing. Let's say 3 of those, right? Maybe do a couple more like that. So now I will clean my brush while this is still wet. So now I have a juicy brush, clean juicy brush. Now I want to go from the outside of the feathered bit in with the water. Right? Earlier I go from here outwards, now I'm going from out there inwards. So you basically pull. So what you get is just, it's similar, but you have a different directional texture on that one. So I'm pulling with that from the edge in. Like that. And then you just let it happen. Let it happen by itself. It just looks a little bit different than this one. So what you can do, the next step from this while this is doing this, is to clean your brush and have a thirsty brush again. And if you want to keep it, if you want to do another line from the outside in with the thirsty brush, see what happens. So this is basically bleaching more, taking more of a, the line is more distinct. Right, so they are quite similar, but you see how they look somewhat different. So just because you move your brush in a different direction, you get like slightly different texture quality. Blue. So I'm gonna mix a bit of blue in here, and let's just do random sort of shape like that. And then I'll clean my brush, and now I'm gonna drop. So my brush will be clean but loaded and juicy. So I'm just gonna drop that loaded water right on the surface like that. And I'm dropping it next to each drop. So I'm not dropping it in the same spot. I'm trying to go away from that same spot. Immediate this reaction. So even when you look at the paper, it looks like it's already dry. See if you can drop. if nothing happens, you see how I've just done a third drop and nothing's happening, that means the paper's, the idea is when you're going to draw something complicated like this, it looks like you're doing a lot, but the paint is doing it. You're not doing very much. The texture all comes from just drop, drop, and pull, pull, and drop, drop, basically. Because most of it is water. The water does a lot of the work. So I did a sketch already, but we can start from scratch. So I'm trying to attempt this guy. So just revising a little bit on portrait. So if you have a nice size paper, you want to put the face in the middle. So the head shape will be like an egg, quite rounded on the top and then quite narrow at the bottom. Doesn't have to be exact. That's kind of the idea. So I'm not gonna use the reference too carefully or too accurately. I'm just gonna put the ear somewhere here. And then I'm gonna do something like this just to place the nose, the eyes. So the eyes will be somewhere on the top of where the ear is, cross, and then the bottom of the ear is where the nose would land, and then the mouth would be just below that. Oh, actually, before we do this, let me go back to So what I want to show also, like you see how here, once I've done all the feathers, I then use a reverse sort of movement with my brush to paint the back of his head. So you kind of need a lot of dark at the back of his head because then you want these feathers to show up. So the idea then, you have to create something very dark behind his head. So you see how this dark is not very clean. It can be, it can be very fun. So you can add directly on the paper. You can mix it right on the paper. Different colors as you blob it on. So I just want to talk about that. So that is so if you have something like this and you want to create that texture in the back to make this come up. So you use something dark. So the movement is kind of the same, but you go backwards, right? So you go inwards like this. So you have to be a little bit careful, but also not that careful. As in, just know where the white areas are. And then as you're moving away from it, like this whole area there's no feathers. You can then fill it with color. But as you come back into the area where the feather is, you're making the same feather movements, you're just moving inwards. You're pulling inwards, if that makes sense. Right, so that kind of looks like part of the feather, but it also looks like it could be part of the back. So I think we are not going to do this because this is too clean. And a lot of the feathers aren't going to be this clean. So we're more looking at this, right? The edges are kind of loosey-goosey like this. So let's try another one. So while this is still wet, you can drop another color in that. For example, another dark color. Or you can drop a yellow even onto a purple. So all this is adding texture as well to the background, as well as color. So not everything has to be mixed on the palette all the time. You can just go directly. That's sort of interesting. Once we get this guy going. So once we have that, we can create the headpiece, the wrapper. There's about a couple of layers of that, right? So you can do 1, 2, 3, or 4. It doesn't have to be too neat. Be a bunch like that. And then let's create the eye. So I'm gonna just put roughly where the eye socket. Yep. Yes. Yep. So if this is the entire egg, the eyes are half. And then you kind of divide that bottom half is the feature. So you can divide that into like a third. Some people do that. So this is a third, 2/3 is the rest of it, the nose and the mouth. And then your eyes are kind of like so the width of one eye is about the width of the middle. So the eye from the edge of one side to the other side, you can divide that into equal thirds as well. So roughly that will be where your eye is going to be. And then your eyebrow kind of depends. If you want it angry, you can tilt it down like this. If you want it more like an arch, you can add a little tail at the end. So this is sort of, it's a guy, but it can be a girl. So if it's a guy, usually guys don't have arch eyebrows. So they tend to have like a straighter, bushier eyebrow that comes across like that. And just to keep it simple, the nose, I would just keep it 2 nostrils on the left and right. And then this sort of a bump for the nose, the whole nostril. That's it. I will try not to add lines along the nose bridge, because you can use watercolor for that. You can suggest that later. Then this is the Cupid's bow. Some people's face, it doesn't show up at all. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to create the opening of his mouth. So the left and right edges of the mouth tends to be the darkest part. And if it's slightly open like this, I try not to draw too hard. And then the top lip is, I'm just doing it very thin. And the bottom one, I would say, is there. So now this looks more like a girl. That's okay. So the way I want to, if I want to make this more masculine, immediately what I can do is I can change this jawline to be more squarish. So if I do that, right, I just pull this down and make the jawline squarer. And then what I do is I'm gonna give the guy a bigger neck. Then it becomes masculine really quick. So let's say this is the neck area. So this is the eye socket. So the eyes doesn't have to be this big. This eye socket includes eyelid, top eyelid, bottom eyelid, etc. So the eye itself, the opening of where the pupil is actually quite about half of that in the middle here. So if you want to give this person more of an expression, what I would do is I would move the pupil to the right or to the left. So let's say this one moves to the right and that one moves to the right, then he's now looking that way. And now everything around his eyes that was his eye socket can just stay there, because we can put some shadows around it, and then we'll paint the face as well. So imagine the face paint is going like this, going up his nose, going around the top of his nose and coming down like that. And then there's another layer, a row going like that and coming down like that. just making this up now, I don't know. I think there's like a white line right on the top. So I'll just do that. So this part will be blue, this would be his skin tone. And then down here, there is a sort of like this is supposed to look like a tongue sticking out, but it's like a red paint. With an outline, I think. So the guy actually has like, the headdress is strapped around his chin, so there's a chin strap somewhere. I'm just gonna ignore that, just doesn't add anything. And then this is gonna be his neck bits and pieces here, so like that. And then there's a big sort of, I don't know what this is. This is the head effigy. So this can be this, so we can use that, or we can also go a little bit crazy and put more of an animal on top of that. Let's do that, just for fun. It's a lot easier, actually. You just do, it's like a cat. Maybe we'll put a cat. So, I'm not gonna spend it doesn't have to be super accurate, okay? I'm just making it up. Something like that. Teeth. And then I think what I'm going to do is put a neck on this animal as well, like that. Yeah. So let's keep it simple. Okay, do a couple of lines here. That's good. And then the rest of this is basically a fanning out of feathers. So there's a big clump of feathers on this side, and then another big clump on this side. And then I would go like a fan. This is just the spines of the feather. I think there's a bunch of feathers going this way, down this way. Let's clean this up. So there's a bunch of stuff I'm ignoring in the original one, because I think there's a head wrap. This guy actually has a head wrap and stuff. We're just gonna not bother with that, which means I'm gonna put a feather behind his head a little bit. There. So we can put a couple of feathers with a pencil. So I would do a few like this, not everything with a pencil, because we want to have a variety. So the feathers going around his neck, I will use a pencil because I'm gonna keep those light, and then the area behind his neck is gonna be dark. So this pencil feather, good to keep it light. And then, yep. I'm not using all of them particularly. So the headdress just now, I just changed the center of his head with the sort of an animal-like thing. Then the rest of it, you can go back to the initial one, which is this guy. Yep, so I just changed this bit here in the middle here. But everything else, you can sort of just follow the reference. Yeah, so he's got two distinctly different shape color feather here, and then everything else is individual kind of feather. So one there, and there, and maybe one here. Okay, so that's kind of as much pencil as I think it needs. Doesn't need every single. First thing I will do is use a blue color for his face, because what I did here was I did this color everywhere. The whole face plus the neck was in this color to begin with. So that's my first layer. And then my second layer is this, just covering the skin, the flesh tones. So you can use just a very light, I use cerulean blue, which is sort of like this sort of weak sort of color blue. So I'll start with this color, and then I will add a yellow and an orange for the skin tone on top of this. So this is my blue mix. Let me just mix the color skin tone first. So it'll be a yellow plus an orange, and then I water it down. So my orange, maybe I'll have to add a little bit of brown, just a touch of brown, because you don't want him to be orange. So you want to dumb down the orange to dull it down with a bit of brown, but the blue just stays blue. Okay. That's the mix. So this you gotta work really quick because you don't want it to dry. You want it still to wet. So quickly, I'll just do one round of the skin with blue. Everything. Everything plus neck. While it's still wet like this, you can go clean your brush, and then you can go into your mix, this flesh tone mix. And then now I'm just gonna do from the tip of the nose down. What I'm doing here is I'm pushing the blue backwards. And then don't spend too much time going back and forth on the skin. Just go one round and that's it. Because you don't want to mix the blue with the skin tone. You want to push the blue down, that's all. Right? If you go back and forth too much, this will become brownish and grayish and muddy. So that's the skin tone. And then while this is still sort of wet, what I sometimes do is I try to lighten up certain parts of the nose, like the bleaching that I did before. So this is just a clean brush. Just gonna take some of this color away from the top tip of his nose. And then maybe the inside of his eye, that can also go. glossy clean brush. So I'd use this. I'm just lightening up the bottom of the eyes ever so lightly. And then I think I'm going to lighten up the middle of his forehead here as well. Just a bit. So this is kind of like makeup, you know, it's like contouring. Because the face isn't flat, right? If you just have one color, it looks flat. So I'm now just adding different dimensions by taking away color. And then I will go back to more blue. So this is a paint, right? Apparently this, nobody can tell me why is the Aztec, where do they get their turquoise color from? Where does because there's a lot of even sculptures that have this sort of Mayan blue, they call it. So I'm going in with a bit more blue, a slightly darker blue now on the top of the eye. Ooh, that's a lot. Too much. Too much. So if you find that, oh my god, that's too much, I'm just going to use a brush, a clean brush, and try to just water it down a tiny bit. So under eye should, above the eyelid is dark. So I'm just trying to add more. And then I will go slightly on the right and left side of the nose. So that's the shadow. And then as I come down here, I probably could go back to my skin flesh tone just now. I'm gonna add shadow under his nose here. And to the lips. What else? And then the bottom of the lips down here. With some darkness. So this is just second layer shadow, and then the neck needs a little darker color. So I do it in this sort of triangular shape. And now what I'm going to do is probably adding a little bit of that same color just here. So we can finish all the dark area of the face on your own time later. We don't want to take too much time on that. So now let's see what else is happening in this hair. Okay, there's a very dark blue here. So I'm just gonna do one layer of it. All the texture on top, you can put it on later. This is just the base color. Second color is like a reddish tone, so I'll do that. Oops. It's okay. They kind of sort of merged over here, but that's fine. And then like a brown. supposed to be like a light color, so I'm just just for fun, because there is a necklace going on there, I want to have a completely different color. Let's just put a blue or green or something completely different. Maybe a green. Oh, that's too dark. Too dark. So I just do it very lightly and I'm not filling the whole space with green. It's just a So you do want that to stand out. And then, yeah, we can fix all the rest of the teeth and stuff. I want this to be intense. Okay, so now we can go to those exercises we did earlier for different feathers. So you can start with a clean brush. Here, if you want. So water first. What should we use? I think this needs to be like a gold color. Okay, that's too wet. So if it's too wet, you can just use a thirsty brush to spread it across. Just put it here. So don't worry, this is completely undefined because it's too wet, but that's my first layer anyway. It's okay. Next, I'm gonna go with an orange. So I'm always gonna just use water first. So let's go. Nothing special is happening there. It's a bit orangey. So the next one, I'm gonna use water, and spine. sometimes it's too light, so I added another color and then a slightly darker color and then pulling it. And then you can alternate back and forth depending on the color. It can be orange, yellow, gold, red, anything you like. So this is me doing it the reverse. I put the dry paint down and then with a wet brush I pull the color outwards. Next one is I'm going to put a pink here. So I'm going to do a big blob of pink, and then while it's still wet, I'm going to do that bleaching thing. So clean brush, putting water in the middle. Brush it out. So to do the thirsty brush, you have to make sure your color is intense. Otherwise it won't show up. So let's do that again here. So what I do is, alternately I will try and put a different color in between so they're all a variety of colors. And also trying to change the method slightly. So I am sticking to orange, yellow, red at the moment. But if you look at the guy, he's probably full of different colors, right? He has green in it as well. So this is up to you. You don't have to follow my colors. You can really do whatever colors you like. But just for consistency purposes, I'm just going to stay in this top. sometimes if I have one color going down like this, I can change the other side. So I'll do a yellow gold on the other side of this part. So one feather doesn't have to have always one color. It can be two separate colors. And then when they're still wet, when you pull them against each other, they mix a little bit around the paper. And that's what we get. Nice and messy. So here's another one. I'll do a quick red one on the right side. And then into that I'll mix a gold right on the paper. So that's very wet. I'm just going to drop some water. So using clean brush is always good to soften it. So if this is very intense, you could just use plain clean brush. And you can then bleach the middle as well. So notice that every single part of the feather, every feather is done slightly differently, so we want to have a variety of results. Okay, now I need to look at the reference. So I'm just gonna add a blue now. So what I'm doing now is doing the reverse, where I'm gonna start adding dark blue in the midst of the hair, like that. And then this whole area here can be quite dark. It can be a mix of green and purple or whatever. But this is not part of the headdress. This is the background. So it's good to be quite intense with this color because you want to pop out the feathers. Oh, there's some feathers here, right? So here I have a spine, but I haven't drawn the feather. So the way you can do it is you can also do a negative space where there is actually, you're drawing the space around the feathers like that. So that's now a feather. And then you can then go loose in the back here. So here I'm mixing blue and then a bit of purple in the background. So that's a negative space. I think think we want another one like that here. Okay, so, oh, whoops. Here we want a dark background, and then we're gonna go around this, so this is a negative space feather also. There, and then behind her, this guy, the neck, you can go dark. Like that. And then I'll carry on. To the right. You see how this is all bleeding into this? Perfectly fine, no problem. So as I come down to his neck here, I want to go a little darker. So you can put any other color you like, but if you want to show that there's a shoulder, you can stop about there and then come down. So that's the rest of the person's shoulder. So now back here, this is all the background. You can do crazy color. You can do brown, purple, green, whatever. So it sort of shows the festivity, right? As we're drawing the background. So we're going to repeat the same that way. So, okay, let me show you also another way. If you can use a smaller brush for the spaces up the top here, that's easier to do. But if you also have a dagger brush, let me show you. It doesn't have to be this. I don't actually have a small dagger brush, but this is an interesting tool for moments like this, because if you have a dagger brush working with this, what I do is I'll turn this around to make it easier to get into this spaces here, for example. So because my dagger brush is pointy, I can get into here much easier. You see? So that's now the negative space behind this feather. It's far easier to control the shape using this kind of brush. If you have this. If not, don't worry about it. But this is what I normally use my dagger brush for, a lot of feathery bits. So here also, because there's not much space for me to paint, but I do want to get a bit of this dark background in there. This is how I do that. So I do the same thing when I have, like, say a bouquet of flowers and I need to get the background colored. So here is another opportunity to use this brush. So point, point. So I'll just do the point first, and then I can then be free to do outside my hand. This can be a mix. So if you don't have a dagger brush, a plain, clean, round one is good. This is an 8 or a 6. Works quite good as well. So this spots out, it pops out the area around the chin and the face, like this. So you see how this is actually much nicer color than that. That's a bit too light. So what I would do is then I can go back here and make this darker. Yeah, so just a little bit darker, which just changes the color of it all. Gonna go inwards from here like this. So if I do the background color inwards into the feather, it gives the feather more dimension. Because this is all a big blob, it needs some definition, so doing that. So I think behind this big blob of yellow, I need, I think a slightly dark yellow, even orange maybe, just to add dimension, so that would work better. Yeah. Okay, so just to quickly wrap it up, let me go. I can kind of probably add an extra color, an extra darkness to the face, because now it needs it. So eyebrow. So I'm just going an extra layer of blue now. And then I would probably add dark blue around the forehead here and ear. So adding a bit more shadow left and right of the nose. I'll just do dark color here instead. And define the eyeball. So I'm just using a black pen now. And then maybe the eyebrow needs defining as well. So this is now, we're going to the finishing touches, which can take your time to do. This mouth, so this is this. So don't rush it. I'm a little bit rushy and I don't like that. This is oh, right. So the lip part needs, so I'm not even doing, I don't know about this black lips situation. Maybe I will put a purple lips instead. So this, at this point, you can just do whatever you feel like. Oh yeah, that works. Purple lips work. Put more purple there. Oh, it's bleeding. Okay. I think it needs to bleed down here as well a bit. So under the chin is usually dark anyway, so. Oh yes, and then you can do these balls around the neck. So I would leave a little bit of white inside the ball because I think it has a slight reflection. And it would be nice to have that. Reference doesn't have as much feather. I kind of added a lot more feathers because I was inspired by this guy. So if I want to have a little twinkle in her eye, I just did a twinkle in her eye with the white pen. Comes out really nice. Yeah, so for example, you can do lots of that sort of detail quite quickly. Anyway, I won't keep you. I think we're past the hour anyway. But that's my I'll use. So that can then you can spend hours on finishing like this. Maybe not hours. Spend some time, but it pops it out. If you have no questions, if you have any questions, good seeing you.